how should we be thinking about this kind of like privacy thing? How is that going to evolve over
Privacy
time?
will lose. If you want a firm prediction, it will 100% lose. I'll take the 10-1 bet. It's going to be the same as location sharing. This is so evil. This is so bad. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Like they're going to lose.
Hello, fellow data nerds. My guest today is Chris Hulls. Chris is the founder and CEO of Life360, the family safety platform used by over 70 million people worldwide. Life360 trades on NASDAQ under the ticker LIF and has a market cap of over $3.3 billion. Chris, welcome to World of DAS.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Very excited. We've been old friends.
Yep.
Now, Life360 started kind of like as a simple kind of location sharing, help you kind of manage, understand where your kids are going. Was there an insight that you had early on that this could be like a bigger platform play?
Yeah, I don't want to overstate our level of vision, but the story was a little bit different. We actually started to be very safety focused, inspired by Hurricane Katrina, help families reconnect after big emergencies. It was originally a school idea that was pre-smartphone. So the real insight we had is we built a prototype of the product for the then upcoming Android platform. iPhone was out, but there were no third-party apps. So Android was the first phone where you were going to have background location access. And then the light bulb was like, wow, actually there's something bigger here. We're just seeing where someone is on a phone that's very, very powerful. And we saw that very quickly, like safety sounds good, but out of sight, out of mind. But location was a daily use case. And it was the era of social networks for everything. Like, I mean, younger people probably don't even remember this, but like now that I'm in my 40s, like it was like social networks for people who like golden retrievers who happen to be gay. Like it was and there were so many people that were doing social networks. And our view was like, if you're going after a segment, families, like there were tons of family social networks, like maybe it's a completely different approach. And it was more about utility and safety. And we actually had we got founded with a different name, and we had no money. It was a terrible name. But the idea, once we had that insight, was like, this is actually the way to build the family social network, even though it doesn't look like the family social network at all. And the reason we said Life360 is we had that platform vision essentially from that one and only pivot we did in our first year of existence. 360 meant everything in your life, from people, pets, things.
Yeah.
And our view was if we can get someone using a product so regularly and part of their workflow, it would open up all sorts of opportunities. And the real secret sauce that we figured out was if you have safety, it's out of sight, out of mind. You just have a social product where you're competing with Facebook and all that, but you have no monetization. So we have daily engagement plus safety, and that's what people pay for. And then we get the very virtuous cycle of now we make money, we can reinvest that in growth and features and then build a good product. It definitely grew much more through word of mouth than I ever expected. Even now, it's almost all organic. So we built something people loved, and it's really, in some ways, as simple as that. But
now, you were like my landlord. I was like renting space from you back in the day. We had that office on Bryan Street in San Francisco.
Yep.
I was almost 10 years ago in 2015, and I really had no idea. I was like, oh, this is cool, but I had no idea this could be like such a big business. Like, what did I not see at the time?
I think what most people didn't see, and I think it ties in with just like echo chambers, is the coastal elite, so to speak. And I'm not trying to get political here, but it does seem to have some skew on party lines. Like, it would only be dumb, horrible parents who would use such a thing. And like, my kids are good, so why would I use that? And I'm not cheating on my family. Like, it was very like the hoity-toity elites were like, thumbing their noses.
Like almost like a privacy mindset. I don't want someone tracking, like that type of thing.
It was deeper. It was like, you're a horrible parent and person if you use this. We're all about freedom, and that worked so much in our favor. And all the privacy hysteria also works in our favor because the big guys just did not enter this space. So where we got really good luck, I'm digressing a bit, is we were so toxic and evil, so to speak, that we've just had like no competition. And now we're trying to get it. We've already gotten so big, which is great. But I think what people didn't realize was this was not about tracking people. I mean, quite literally, definitionally, it is. But the idea in my mind, I was a free range
peace
kid.
of mind, right? Isn't it like
just
kind
convenient?
Of a peace of mind? Yeah,
just a convenient product. I remember when cell phones were first coming out mainstream. People were saying like, if you have a cell phone, you're going to always be reachable. Like, don't you?
Yeah,
Does
totally.
anyone say that anymore? Does anyone give up a cell phone? Like, no. So that was our insight. This is just useful. And one of the things I believe is people are lazy and take the path of least resistance. And if you build something useful, people are they're gonna say all these high and mighty things, but they're just gonna do whatever is useful. So I was surprised that people did not get that this was just like a very simple, practical use case. My parents,
But
as
and you
much as
didn't
they
even have kids at the time, so you
no,
weren't even come from experience at the time, right? You're
no, I think one of the things I have been good at is step outside of myself and put myself in someone else's shoes. I'm probably at least mildly autistic. I'm slightly exaggerating, but like I'm in my head. So it's very fun for me to really figure out what makes people tick at a very fundamental level, even like thinking it through to like literally the Big Bang. Like, what are these different forces that drive people? What is this all about? What are underlying triggers? So some of my favorite classes in college were psychology. It's not that professors almost knew much, but I'm really, really, really curious about what drives people. And I think one thing that worked very well for me in this business is that I've always been like a black sheep of black sheeps, and I think a lot of founders are black sheeps, but I'm even a black sheep from a founder perspective. And so I think a lot of younger founders at the time, and probably still today, they build products they would use themselves and do whatever's trendy. And I've never been trendy. I was a horrible salesman early on, but I kind of just did whatever popped in my own head and didn't really care what conventional wisdom was. So,
no. I
um,
mean, now that you are a parent, and obviously you're a lot of your customers, the vast majority of your customers are parents. Love to get like dive in a couple like parenting and technology questions. There's this kind of free range child
yep,
movement now. Jonathan Haidt and others have
yep.
talked about it. Like, um, do you think today, because of social media, because of cell phones, because of other types of things, like kids are less independent than previous generations?
I think yes, but I don't think that's the first order issue. Um, I think the first order issue, and some of this gets into really hot button stuff, but the safety culture and paranoid cultures, I think it's more honestly like some of it's like the decline of Western society. Like
Yeah.
what's the whole thing like?
Yeah,
Uh,
safetyism is everywhere in society. It's not just parenting, right? Everything's there's a safetyism. Everything is kind of made of Nerf nowadays.
yeah, and I'm at my school. I'm so irritated at our school. Like you can't say strengths and weaknesses. It's strengths and stretches. It's freaking insane. And they won't discipline the kids. It's terrible. My daughter
Is
had
this one of those schools where like everyone gets a trophy kind of thing? Like,
yes, everyone gets a trophy, and there
Mhm.
can't be an MVP on the soccer team. I think that I'm in Marin County, which is for people who don't know, right north of San Francisco, and the most liberal place and there is, but also very cloistered, where it's like one percenters who don't have to like actually. It's there are luxury beliefs out there
Yeah.
in spades. But yes, so I think I don't think technology is the first order issue around safetyism and all that. I think I think the vector of like addiction and just the skill of hitting dopamine cycles and all that. I think that's different but related.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please sign up for our newsletter. Go to worldofdas.com. The link is in the description below. Now back to the video.
And I think people rise to whatever challenge they have to face, and the world is so soft right now, and I think we have kind of skewed more to good intentions around love and care and all that, but like if you're not working that muscle of grit, it just doesn't happen. So
Now, parents are much more involved in kids' lives today than they were in the past.
yeah,
Just this idea of helicopter parenting, and it's like all your kids are on a travel team. You're constantly moving. You're constantly driving around
yeah.
all these places and stuff like that. Like, why has that happened? Like, what? Because that's not a social media thing. That's
No,
something
I think
deeper.
there's a sort of a couple easy answers. Some gets very controversial. Probably even too controversial for me to get into here, but I'll
You're a public company CEO, so
Yeah,
you can only be so controversial.
yeah. But I think the non-controversial piece is it's kind of Maslow's hierarchy. Um, if you're truly, and I grew up. Well, I grew up in I'll back up. I swear I'm going to make this relevant. I grew up in a town called Point Reyes. This is where I am right now. I'd really love it. But there's 350 people in the town I grew up in, and there were kind of three buckets of people: ranch owners, ranch workers, and a very small sliver of like eccentric hippies. And my family was in that sliver of eccentric hippies. But I grew up with like ranchers were relatively wealthy, and then my best friends were kids of illegal Mexican immigrants. And the reason I bring this up is that what I saw from the Latino culture here. I'm not saying it's all Latinos by any means, but just the people who had to get over the border, which I really admire about that. And my mom was actually an illegal immigrant as well, but illegal immigrant to Hong Kong from China, escaped in the bottom of a boat. Um, if that is your life, you're thinking short term about survival. You do not
Yeah.
have the ability to think about self actualization and feeling good. And so I think we probably are on some meta cycle of like the world has become soft because we've had how many years of prosperity, especially in the Bay Area. And I think even look at this election. I'm saying this as an arm's length person. I did not vote for either major candidate. I think things have been working really well for the coastal elites, but it hasn't been working well for the middle of the country. I think that does directly tie into some of these luxury beliefs and why coastal people really didn't like Life360, because we were kind of like, if you are, I think the real helicopter parents are the ones that are bringing their kids to like 17 activities per week and all that, and those are the
Yeah.
same people that were like rolling their eyes at the evil Life360. So there's
Well,
some
let
irony
me
there.
give you a my theory, and you could dissect where you think it's good and where you think it's bad about why we've had so much more like helicopter parenting, and parents are spending way more time with their kids. The My theory is that just for whatever reason, like people care about where you go to college so much more. It's so important. I think it's like the last thing parents are allowed to brag about. Like, Chris, you could win a Nobel Prize, but if my kid goes to Harvard, like I've just trumped you in
Yeah,
any type of kind of conversation. And it's like, it's just the last thing we can talk about.
yeah,
Um, and then people are just like so intent on their kid going from like the number X school to the number X minus 10 school better, 10 spots
yeah,
better than they were before. And so they're like doing travel, they're doing all this other like random, they're like, I'm going to get my kid into fencing or, or whatever
yeah,
type of thing. This is my theory. And they're just like so wrapped up in it.
yeah. I think I half agree. I think that's
Okay.
the very wealthy version, but I'm trying
Yep.
to think how that translates to regular Joe middle class. And I think I agree with you overall, but I think there's a less I must go to Harvard version versus
Yeah.
more like
Yes.
my
Yep.
identity is my children,
My
and
identity
they
is
are
my
what,
children. Yep.
and
Yeah,
this is what
exactly.
gives me meaning. And uh, I think for moms in particular, there's like the sacrifice you do for your children is you're allowed to brag about that. I mean,
Yeah.
just look at the Facebook
Totally.
posts and all that, and it's not always it's Harvard or whatever. Like my kid
Yeah.
scored the goal, or I'm trying to get my kids to go to community college for what it's worth. I think that's keep them grounded, and you can get into better schools that way anyway. But yeah, I don't want my kids to be my resume.
Because I mean, I remember you telling me you were like a free range kid. I think you told me you like went to Africa by yourself
Yeah,
when you were like 11 or something,
yeah.
which is kind of
My 12th
crazy.
birthday was in Africa, and 1,000 acres. Was a local family was watching me. There was no running water or electricity, and to poop in a hole, and it was pretty cool. So I'm probably the most unexpected person running this company, but I think the fundamental misunderstanding is that we're tracking at. Like in
Yeah.
theory, and I truly believe this, and it's how I will use it with my kids when they're old enough, and even with I'm an anxious person, which is where I have these competing personality types, but like I get anxious when my family members drive. It's not fully rational, although it kind of is. That's the one area where safety is like a real thing with driving,
Yeah.
but use Life360 to have less anxiety and actually push into those comfort zones. And I think the majority of our customers actually use it that way. It's just convenient to know how far someone away is. And instead of me being paranoid about my kids out there driving at night or not getting home, I have this app and it will keep me informed.
Yes.
And the percentage of parents who go over the top, I am making this up based on some kind of like fuzzy intuition, but I would imagine 90% of people use Life360 in a very healthy way. 9% go over the top, but more roll your eyes over the top, and 1% are truly toxic with their kids.
Yeah.
And actually, on the free range topic, I just saw it was Lenore Skenazy, who she's part of that free range movement. I don't know if she considers me an enemy or a friend. I consider her a friend because I actually support what she's up to. I think she doesn't believe me that I think tracking apps can be a good thing. But there was some parent that let their kids walk to school on their own at 10. 10 is freaking fine. And then they got in trouble and they're being forced to use a tracking app, which is insane to me. And I wonder, like, why? And I would say the absolute last thing any parent should worry about is their kid being kidnapped. It is so, so, so rare. And so I don't judge really anyone for where they want to be on the safety spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that is weird to me is emotions over data or logic. Like, if you want to jump out of planes or whatever, fine. But then if you're also like, just make sure you're stack ranking correctly in your head the appropriate level of risk. And like, sometimes people outside of my professional life, personal life, I get judged for being reckless quite a bit. I don't want to bring family dynamics too much into it, but I am constantly told how reckless and crazy I am. But I know many people had little kids with like pools without covers on them, and I will guarantee I have never done anything with my kids that is anywhere as close to as dangerous as having an uncovered pool out there. Period. So. So the whole idea of like social acceptability around risk, it's like, that's just human nature. That probably hasn't changed. I mean, maybe with like social media, it's easier for these trends to go viral and then just jump on the emotional bandwagon. But yeah, do not worry about your kids being kidnapped. Like, I want to team up with, like, if you are using Life360 to prevent your kids from getting kidnapped, you are being an irrational user of our product. I'm happy for you to use it. Our marketing team now is great, but people told me not to say these sort of things, like undermining yourself. Like, no, if you are using Life360 because you're worried about your kids getting kidnapped, you have your priorities wrong.
What are some parenting behaviors that are currently maybe quote unquote weird that you think will be much more normal 10 years from now?
Well, location sharing. I think that's already that's our big one. We proved that one right. I don't really know. A lot of the things I was hoping to change the world have become normal. So a lot of, if you asked me 5 years ago, contrarian beliefs, I could tell you so many, but I feel very happy and relieved that a lot of them are less controversial now. This is a little bit indirect, but a lot of people say there's going to be a return to like the real world and get out of this digital addiction we have. I'm very suspicious of that. And if anything, I think we're going to be uploaded to the hive mind, and that's going to be normalized. And my reason for saying that is, I don't think you can put toothpaste back in the tube. And if anything, these trends are accelerating. So I wonder, I'm not making this a prediction per se, but this whole idea of like get off the screens, it might go the complete other way, and we're just plugged into the matrix at some point. In fact, I'd go so hard saying I think there will be some sort of like we are all plugged into the matrix moment. And I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but in terms of data privacy, I think people completely get confused about data privacy, but I think there is a real concern, like the future is like Westworld or the Matrix or something. I think that is a fair debate. But
in our homes today, we have so many listening devices. Most of us have cameras everywhere. And we're starting to see a world where like we might start interacting with them more, right? You've got these glasses where you might be interacting with, or you may have, already sometimes when like doing homework with my son, we'll have like a ChatGPT listener that chimes in or something while we're doing it. How should we be thinking about this kind of like privacy thing there's so many benefit, yet there's like these scary things we're not sure about. How do you think people are gonna how is that gonna evolve over
Privacy
time?
will lose. If you want a firm prediction, it will 100% lose. I'll take the 10-1 bet. It's going to be the same as location sharing. This is so evil. This is so bad. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But
Yeah,
the drive to better
there's so many
convenience, better
benefits.
productivity, like they're going to lose. There's going to be the next generation of Luddites. It's kind of how I feel about the privacy advocates.
Yeah.
They seem to really get tied in knots around just being completely illogical. I think they're zealots. But I don't think these trends are going to reverse at all. And I'm not saying that is good or it's bad. I think I'm just being very matter of fact that my read on human psychology, which we have been very good, is if something is convenient and better, people are going to go there over time. And location sharing, the cat's out of the bag. It's done. Video cameras everywhere. That trend is done, only going to accelerate. I'm probably in the vanguard of that. I have like 30 cameras everywhere. And are people going to watch me? No, I have a camera right here. And sometimes my wife chimes in and like spies on me as a joke. Sometimes that's a little bit weird, but I don't mind. And I think that's just, I think that.
But you wouldn't necessarily want me spying in on you, right?
No, I'm way more open than most people know. I don't shoot spying on me when I'm working with him, but but to the point that fear is very misplaced.
I could see the earnings thing you're working on or something on your laptop, and I could, I don't know, somehow trade on it. I think
that fear is very misplaced.
Okay,
I mean, maybe I'm not like a big deal or anything, but I guess I probably should be a little bit more worried because I have the keys to this castle with all this data. But even I don't worry too much. But for the regular person, like quantify what is this actually thing you're worried about?
Yep.
Like data sales, I had an engineer I really liked in our company, one of our top engineers. I was arguing with him because he was like really upset about us being in data. And he's like, well, the main thing is like, you're making money off me without my permission. It's like, well, people give permission. And like, what are you actually worried about? I don't know. I just don't like it, but you actually get paid for it. It's like, okay, do you know this? Okay, do you want me to, where would you like me to send your 30-cent a year check?
Right.
So why did this idea that these companies are making so much money off your data? It's like you have to have huge critical mass, and it has to be.
Yeah, and it usually is like 30 cents a year type of thing. Yeah, it's kind of in that range.
Yes. So the whole mental model people have around data is just so far off because I think there are some concerns. I get worried about TikTok in China. Like that seems fair, kind of mass manipulation and disinformation. That seems like a very valid concern. But the idea of these companies doing something nefarious in the short term or midterm, I don't get it. I mean,
there's a lot of like regulators who care about it. Obviously, like the FTC cares about it. There's like different attorneys general that care about it. Historically, like certain senators like Ron Wyden and others like have cared about it quite a bit. Like, how do you and then obviously there's the EU, which may have different kind of takes on it than other ones, or even within states. California may have a slightly different take than Kansas. Yeah. Like, how do you see all these things evolving?
Yeah. So first, I'll give a company answer. We got out of this controversy. It was not worth it for us as a business because once we were marked as evil there, it was just going to be bad. And I have now experienced that, the press can label people as bad and they can make your life very miserable, and they go to the regulators and the politicians do what people want. So for Life360, we are out of the world of monetizing PII without explicit consent. We are doing stuff I'm very excited about. Like, if you're a good driver, we'll tell you you're a good driver. Like, hey, Auren, like, did you know you're in the top 10% of drivers? We can literally save you $500 a year.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Or we say, Auren, you're in the worst 10% of drivers. If an insurance company ever asks you to share your data, do not do it because you're going to get screwed.
So you're a terrible driver.
But we're going to tell you, and like how anyone can say that's a bad thing is astounding to me. So we're going to do that.
Do you think you have the data to predict if someone's like, going through some like cognitive decline or something like that?
Yeah. So my mom's unfortunately getting Alzheimer's now. So I'm sadly living this thing. And so we are going to get into elder care in 2 years. It's a good business move anyway, but I think I'm a very good product person and I can actually build a product that I need. But yes, I think you can detect so many signals from this data.
Yeah.
And so going back to the main point about why, I think there's very rational reasons to be concerned about these big troves of data. I just think the advocates get it wrong. It's not about companies just want to make money and sell you targeted ads and maybe do cool insights. Like I think this idea of these nefarious companies wanting to sell your kids' location data is just it's beyond conspiracy level thinking. It's just, I think, low IQ thinking, because it's like you don't have to trace the steps too much. But like this does not have any rational sense of like how corporations operate. They're trying to make
I do
money.
think there are scenarios where there is hypothetical harm. There may have not been actual harm ever done in any
or one in a
way.
million. But if there's 1 in a million harm, like, then we're not going to do anything.
Well, even 1 in a million, like there's at least like, okay, well, at least there could be someone who was harmed, and we can talk about that scenario of why they were harmed. Usually it's still it's not even 1 in a million. It's like no one's ever been harmed from this thing ever. And, but there's a hypothetical where they could be, and we want to protect against that hypothetical. And again, it's like, it goes back to that safetyism thing. Like, you can make every road perfect so that no one could ever get an accident on the road. Or you could maybe wait to see a couple accidents in the middle. Okay, now we're going to make the road safer. It all depends on people's level of risk.
Yeah, exactly. And like that, there is no right answer there, but I think you can say, are you stack ranking, like that swimming pool thing? Like, if you're worried about someone stealing your data, but you have an open swimming pool when your kids are there, you are making an illogical choice.
Yeah, and I do think that is the case today, where like a lot of these regulators, like, there's so many more harms. Just like, for instance, people being taken advantage of, like older people being phished, and hackers coming in and actually stealing money and doing nefarious things. Yet, they may be less focused on that and more focused on things that just haven't yet become harm.
Yeah, for sure. And then to take the side of the privacy advocates a little bit, I think this like twinge of like, oh, like all this data, what does this mean for the future of the world? Like, I think that can be scary, because we have seen how people can be manipulated and how governments can misuse it. And if you fast forward 50 years, and if we do have the AI super hive mind, like, that does get very, very, very scary, because it's a brave new world that no one can predict. It's like it's what sci-fi's all about. Like, what happens when, like, you basically know people's patterns so well that you can kind of like predict what they're going to do in the future.
Yeah, one of the things I think in like protecting the hypothetical is important is because like sentiment matters. Like, if you think of like, what is the FTC? What is their goal? Their goal is to enable more commerce, right? That is actually their goal. And people will create commerce if they feel safe and they feel like things are fair, right? If they think they're being taken advantage of all the time, they're going to be less likely to transact. And so they want it's not only just important that people are safe, it's actually potentially even more important that people feel safe for them to transact.
Yeah, exactly. And then a weird thing, going back to strange incongruities related to that, somehow data is evil when it passes between third parties. But if Facebook or Google or Apple has it all in a first-party system, somehow that's okay.
Correct. Yeah, that is the weirdest thing. That doesn't make any sense. Like, that clearly makes no sense at all. Because they're way more powerful because they can join like 50 databases, whereas everyone else has this only tiny sliver that's out there. So it's you're right about that one. That one makes absolutely no sense.
But if you do trace out what are the things that we should truly be worried about, it's the mega corporation that is like the dystopian future.
Correct.
And I don't think they're evil either, but it just seems like
there's more potential for their harm at Apple, Google, Amazon. It's just because they're so much bigger, not because they're any more evil or doing anything. In fact, they may be even better run, and they may have better people, but there's just way more potential for harm just because they have so much more access. So they have more ability to do harm if something goes wrong.
Yeah. And I would say, to be intellectually honest, in the short term, especially when data was new, as you know as well as me, it was Wild West out there.
Yeah.
So I think in those early days of data, like, it was.
There were bad actors. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was just new, though. And I'll give an example where we would get in trouble if we did this now. But it was, I'm going to get the year on, but probably 2012. We were brand new. We had a very senior person at Disney wanted to meet us. And it was Kevin Mayer, who was CEO or something. We were excited about that meeting. And me and my co-founder, Alex, we just kind of hacked together. We did have a God mode into where everyone was. Like, there's nothing nefarious about this. We never used it any wrong way, but we did this data visualization of people in Disneyland, and then we traced individually back. Like, look, here's this thing, and here's the exact home they live in. Here's the line. Like, look what you could do with all this. It was way before any of these laws came out, but it was nothing nefarious. Like, just look how cool this is. Look at all this opportunity. And then things evolved, and like, okay, wait a second. I even was like, wait, that probably was a little loose.
Yeah,
that we could
creepy.
just like log into a laptop and see where millions of people were. But it was like, we probably didn't even have a million people then. But then, of course, it's Wild West. And then you have scaffolding and all that. There probably were some bad actors. There probably were some things that were fast and loose. We always tried to be very above board and have strong restrictions. We always limited sales to governments. Were the governments trying to do weird stuff with it and bypass, what's the Fourth Amendment? What's the unreasonable search? I get all my amendments mixed up, but like, were they trying to bypass that? Probably, I don't know, but like, let's make the rules. Let's stop that from happening. I think we're like,
if they have a subpoena, fine, but
let's solidify rules. Let's first realize that everything's messy when it's new. Doesn't make people evil. We're like, me and Alex were single 20-somethings when we were doing all this. We weren't like, there was no big master evil plan. No one was evil. Let's solidify rules. Let's look at the big stuff. And why does it get so vilified? And there's probably some meta question around, seems like there are all these modern day religions. I don't like, privacy advocacy is like a modern day religion to me. I don't know if there were always modern day religions when we had more established true religions, or not true, but like mainstream ones. But it certainly seems like people latch onto issues and they just become massively blown out of proportion.
One of the things is companies are like people. Like, they make mistakes all the time, and sometimes it's not because there's any like design. Sometimes it's just an oversight. Sometimes it's like they just didn't think it through or whatever. I didn't think through all the pieces. And to me, I like to see like, okay, when the company makes a mistake, like, okay, well, like, do they react to it? Do they admit? Do they make amends? Do they then fix it so they're less likely to make that mistake in the future? Just like a person, like, you know, you want people, when you have your toddler, like, are they learning from these things over time, or are they can continue to do these things like, over and over again?
Yeah, and then semi-related.
But like, nobody gives them like, people don't like think, oh, like a company should never make mistakes. It's like, well, of course a company's going to make mistakes. Like, that's what happens.
Yeah, and I bet one thing that people have run companies, especially got to some piece of scale, is that the idea that there's some like hive mind around a company, it just doesn't exist. It's like, it's stacking on layer and layer of individual actions. And as you get bigger, people have a narrower and narrower aperture almost by definition. So you get this like emergent behavior that might look like there's some master plan, but it's just like emergent behavior of large masses of people. And I think
exactly. Sometimes it's like, oh, Apple decided this. It wasn't actually, it might have not been Apple. It was like some person at Apple somewhere in the organization decided something. Like, I doubt the CEO even knew about it, right? It's like, or they said, oh, the Communist China Party like decided, well, it's like, well, actually some random person decided. It's like, it may have not gone all the way to the top, or the US government decided X. Well, it's like, oh, no, actually, like, I doubt it went to the president. Like, it's some random person somewhere decided, and it's like, and maybe tons of other people in the government disagree, but for whatever reason that got decided to but they're like, oh, the whole government's policy. No, it's like, actually, like, it's Bob's policy or Mary's policy to do it.
And you've probably gets to conspiracy theories, Illuminati and all that. Like, I'm not a billionaire, but I've gotten pretty far along. You're further along than me, but I know lots of these billionaires, and I'm still waiting to figure out when they open the secret door where the true masterminds are. But the billionaires I know are as confused as I am, and or I'm just haven't made the cut yet, or I'm just doing a good job of lying and deceiving people about the secret
you're in on the
cabal.
Everyone on this call knows you're in on the conspiracy.
I'm in on the conspiracy.
That's what someone in on the conspiracy would do. They would deny they're part of it.
Exactly.
You know, one of the things that, like, and I know you guys do this, is like, we you know, in all the companies I've been involved with that are like in the data world, they have this kind of thing they call the mom test, where they basically take like everyone all the employees of the company, and they basically take their collective mom and say, okay, like what can we do to protect this person? And for most people, their moms are not, maybe not the most savvy internet
Yep.
users. They do need protection.
Yep.
They could be taken advantage of by
Yep.
scammers and stuff like that. So we actually have like an obligation to take
Yep.
care of her, and then they kind of bake in for almost every company I know, like that mom is in the room of every product decision. Now again, they might
Yep.
not always get it right, but she's in the room, and
Yep.
they're actually taking that into account, that kind of core person in the account.
Yep. Exactly.
Now what the you guys, which what I always thought interesting is like there was a point where in your history where you just based on the dint of your cap table, you had to go public, and you kind of had to go public in an interesting way. You went
Yep.
public on the Australian stock market. Walk us through that kind of journey.
Yeah. So if I back up even a couple underlying things, I grew up very middle class, and my dad was an entrepreneur, never had a big win, and we kind of had some money when I was a kid, and then lost it all in high school, and that was a jarring thing. And my mom was almost starved to death as a kid as an immigrant from China post-communist takeover. So I have some deep-seated insecurities about money, and I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. As a whole longer story about how I fell into this. I was very close to being a banker, and so when you go public, you clear out your preference stack.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how sophisticated all the listeners are here, but to oversimplify
They're in
things,
the top one. Our listeners are top 1% of sophistication.
Okay, so everyone knows if you're private, like the investors get paid before you, and most founders eventually get fired, and very few make it the whole way. And so there's so many companies. I think it's happened in 2022 after the market corrected. Like, you can work 10 years and you're out and you get nothing.
Yeah.
I am very security focused, so I like being public. If you get a little bit woo-woo, I know a lot of CEOs do the Enneagram, which is kind of like horoscopes for smart people. But I am a rare one for CEO. I'm like a 6, which is like the loyal skeptic. So I'm very self-preservation focused. So
yeah, most people are like a 3-ish, right? Or
3 or 8. 3 is like achiever, 8 is challenger. So I'm an extreme minority because like I'm anti-risk taking, but I'm here, which is some parallel to the company overall. So being public, it was like, okay, I'm going to get a little bit of liquidity. I didn't get FU money doing that by any means, but it meant that we would no longer have a situation where I would get fired or gone.
And
or
you
run a home run.
you had a pref stack also where maybe people had like a 2x or 3x.
We didn't have any of that. It wasn't that messy, but it was getting bigger. I mean, one thing I think we were smart about was we were a freemium business model, which is a high risk business model, but we were prescient enough to realize like the only way Life360 is sustainable is huge scale, because we did very quickly realize that we were on to a very fundamental use case enabled by mobile. And if you tried to put it behind a paywall, which many of our competitors do, you'd just be killed by the freemium product. That's how we beat out all the carriers who were trying to monetize early on, and we put them all out of business. So that was one. It was just downside protection. For me, the other one is we were not an overnight success. We were probably like literally 7 years too early to this trend. And so we just had a messy cap table, and it was a good moment to reset. And we were able to get some strategics out, and they got to make some money too. So it was not like a nefarious thing. It's like time to transition. So
and Australia was just a easier place to make it happen as a public company.
Our very first angel investor, now a very good friend and board member, happened to be Australian in Australia, and was actually on a vacation there to visit him, where we just did a couple meetings and met the folks in the exchange. They were saying, come here instead of do the Series D or whatever. And it was a very controversial thing to get through our board, because it was such a weird thing to do.
Yeah, because it's not common.
Yeah, but that is part of our success. Like,
in fact, most of the other companies I know who went public in Australia like didn't survive. Like it was almost like a sign that it was a bad sign.
But we were more like first principles. Like who cares? I mean, there are some problems with it, and like we've hedged our bets a lot, and ironically, we've never needed any of these hedges, because some we have actually. We took venture debt early on and saved the company, and a lot of people say you don't take venture debt. I just want it as a rainy day fund. And so a couple times my conservatism has paid off. But I think we started the ASX process like 30 or 50 million of revenue. Now we're closer to 400. So we've been fine. So I am happy with how it all worked out. If I had the same information then I had I would not change that path. If I knew how
Yeah.
well we have done, I wouldn't have done it because we wouldn't have needed to. But it worked quite well as that hedge. And if you if you try to say, well, it didn't work for other companies, but more first principles, it was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense for us.
And eventually you listed on NASDAQ.
Yeah.
Is that really just because that's where it's just you're way more respectable if you're on NASDAQ? It's just like that's where everyone treats the best companies, and it's just like, okay, we have to go on NASDAQ as well.
Yes and no. It's multiple things all at once, that being part of it. So sometimes don't oversimplify. We are a U.S. company in San Francisco.
Yeah.
It's always a little bit weird. We have really not tried to do much corporate PR, but we want to attract good people. We want to have better access to capital. We want investors to understand us.
Look, good long-term investors.
Yeah, it just makes sense for us to be on the NASDAQ.
Yeah.
We were hopeful that multiples would go up because we always traded very poorly relative to our peers. Now we're much more in the range, and that happened after our listing. And I think it's because
you're attracting a different class of investor too, right? That is kind of more used to it.
I really like our Australian investors. And I think it could be easy, like, oh man, some of the questions they ask are so basic, but we went to them, and I try to put myself, she's like, they might have heard a pitch from like a coal mine earlier that day, and then they're hearing a tech company.
Yeah.
And it's just small. So if I were to start getting a pitch from a coal mine, I would probably sound quite dumb. So they're not dumb at all. They're just more, because it's a smaller market. Exactly. So it was a natural transition, and then it has been great for us. The share price has done well. All of a sudden, it seems like we're recognized as a larger business. Like we were so under the radar, and that actually worked in our favor because we had no competition, which is also very strange. It's getting much easier to hire. I think that's only the ASX or moving to the NASDAQ. We have a great CEO, Auren, who's just been amazing with the senior hires she's done. We have been one of the companies actually profitable and generating cash, whereas like so many tech companies with big valuations were subsidizing growth. We have always been very prudent managers. I think everyone said they were doing that, but it took 2022 to kind of let the tide come out and see who actually was. We never got ahead of our skis in terms of our burn. And so it was very easy to navigate that transition. I think companies with our profile are getting recognized now in a way that they weren't when it was the go-go days.
Now, a few personal questions. We're taping this right now, and you're just coming off of like almost a quarter sabbatical that you took off, which is pretty rare for anybody. And it's even more rare for a CEO, and it's even more rare for a public company CEO. So walk us through just like, how did you even think about it, and how would you recommend that?
I've wanted to do it for a number of years, and this is my 17th year, so no one's going to accuse me of not putting in the time. We was waiting for the time being right, and I'm really happy with our leadership team now. I am irrelevant day to day. I have no ego attached to my job. If I ever felt someone could do my job better, I would happily give them the reins. I still think I'm needed from a vision in a lot of things, but day to day I'm not, which was awesome. We got our listing done. We got through the right planning process, and it was just, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it now. And I was just getting burned out, and I only realized after the sabbatical how burned out I was, and it's very different than being depressed or stressed. I actually think I'm quite good at not getting stressed. I very rarely feel stressed about work, but just the feeling of in this hamster wheel, like that was very. I wasn't lying to myself. It turned out that I was in this hamster wheel, and I was able to get out of that. So I wonder if like every 5 years you should do a reset, and it also forced the company to work without me and figure out where the weak points were, and there weren't that many day to day. But it was a good opportunity to step back, and I was like, oh, I actually can be truly happy again. Not that I was depressed, but again, I was in a hamster wheel.
Now, I think maybe at the beginning of it, I happened to see you in Europe with you and your kids and your wife. But then I assume at some point, like your kids have to go back to school and stuff. Yep. So like, what did you do during that time?
To get the boring stuff out of the way, I did a trip to Europe, which overlapped with you a little bit in Europe, but that was for the family. I love sitting at home. So I did that. I did a bunch of personal stuff to get affairs in order. I mentioned my mom getting Alzheimer's, so I lined up her care and did family planning stuff. And then I had a time where it was more inward and spending some time to reflect. I'm into journeys of the mind, so I got deeply into meditation, and I've also tried all sorts of different substances. And I think that's something. If I have to make predictions, I think this whole psychedelic thing is here to stay. Maybe it'll stay a fringe-ish, but so many highly successful and competent people swear by them now. So I continue that journey.
So you think in the future there'll be like more people, significantly more people doing like psychedelics than today?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know how much it breaks out. It seems like it's like a secret hidden in plain sight, and a lot of them are legal now.
It does seem like we've kind of reached like peak marijuana use. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but it seems like that's kind of leveling off and maybe even starting to go down a bit in the U.S. at least. Like there's just some sort of peak that it reached, but obviously psychedelics are less, maybe less.
I think they're so different. They're not fun,
today.
nor are they always easy.
Yeah.
Like they're stretching you.
It's not a everyday use like some people use for marijuana or something.
I mean, some like ketamine is an extremely powerful and legal one, and some people who have used it recreationally, I've kind of given them the full experience. Like, no, you're kind of missing the point. It's like, well, it's not even the same feeling or drug or anything. So, I don't think we're going to get a world where everyone's addicted on psychedelics. This is not how they work. Especially if people do them. It's often not pleasant, but good. So I think that the trend is here to stay. And I would make a prediction that of successful CEOs, it will, in the not too distant future, the majority will be using
majority.
I bet. Yeah.
Oh wow.
I'll put that at 10-year.
A majority are doing psychedelics at least once a year type of thing, or once or twice a year type of. Is that what you think?
Every few years.
Every few
Some
years.
will go a lot more hardcore, but I just think it's such a powerful.
And not just at Burning Man, but that they're doing it for other kind of things.
Yeah. Okay. Personal development ways that will actually help them.
Okay. Wow. That would be the majority. I would be surprised, but I would be. Well, I guess we'll find out.
That's a longer term. Maybe I say a third. But if I'm provocative, at some point it will be the majority. I'm not saying they're going to be doing it all every week and be these gurus or whatever. But I think it will be a very accepted part of the toolkit. Yeah,
you might be. I mean, for Silicon Valley CEOs of just like tech companies, maybe not public tech companies, but of just like let's say Series B and up tech companies. I would certainly say it's over 10%, and maybe as high as a third. I don't know.
Yeah, it's moving up, and I bet of the public company. Well, the public company CEOs traditionally are older and are not the founders. So I'm kind of.
Yep.
I think the founders are the crazier break the rule one. So
that's
I will
right.
limit my
People who
prediction
rise to corporate ranks are probably less likely.
It's a little different, and they're more open to it. But I think for creative people, I think they will hear so many respectable people talking about how powerful it was that they're going to get on the bandwagon. I think even Steve Jobs is talking about acid being such a fundamental thing for him.
But
it was illegal.
He was doing it when he was 20.
Yeah, but still doing it. I think this stuff sticks with you.
Yeah,
in terms of breaking you out of a rigid way of thinking.
For somebody like me that has never done any, I've never like smoked a joint or anything. Like, if you had to like try to convince me, what would you say?
Do you like food?
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of. Okay.
I like donuts.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people say I don't need this. I can read about it. I get it. Some people, but would like. It's almost like someone saying like, "Oh, I read the recipe for the donut. I know what's in it. It's flour and sugar. Like, I don't need to try it. Look, I got the menu right here."
Yep.
So it's like you're reading the menu but not eating the food. Like first person experience is a whole different ball game. And I think one of the things we are seeing is like this. There are different waves of science and all that, and I think we started overlooking the whole aspect of phenomenology. It's like everything's objective, third party, human experience is somehow like this thing that is lesser than, and it's more like all this arm's length cause and effect, all mathematical. But like, what if consciousness is the more fundamental piece, and like how certain things are ineffable and can't really be easily put into words or numbers. Maybe everything can be numbers at some point. I don't know, but like words for sure. So I would just say you absolutely can't logic chop your way to say that you know it or understand it. And so
Yeah.
I encourage people to look at that. And then it's also extremely safe. The one I think should be used more is ketamine. And that's because it's, first off, it's fully legal. So I can be on here talking about it, and maybe some investor thinks I'm weird. I'm fortunately far enough in life, I don't really care about that. I don't want to lose my job or whatever, but if someone thinks I'm weird, that doesn't bother me. So, and even a public company CEO, you get a prescription, so it's legal. It's also extremely safe. Safe in that it was started as a combat anesthetic, and it was combat anesthetic because it does not decrease your central nervous system, so you will keep breathing. And then if your kid breaks their arm and goes to the ER, they will give them ketamine without your permission. It's going to be a dose that's far higher than the psychedelic dose. So the odds of this thing hurting you is essentially zero.
Yeah, I know people, especially in the tech community, that take ketamine, but sometimes it's for to treat a specific thing, like to treat depression or to treat. So it's not necessarily just like just to expand your mind or something like that. But you think it just has kind of like just general benefits outside of those specific things.
Absolutely, and I have a whole layer of them. But yeah, on the ketamine piece, there's I used it both therapeutically and to explore the universe, so to speak.
Okay. Speaking of exploring the universe, you a few years ago or a year ago or so entered into a pumpkin contest. I think for people watching the video can see it behind you.
Right.
And
yeah, those are my two daughters.
So what, you grew a pumpkin? I don't even understand. Like,
this was during COVID, and it was like everyone got weird. And I have a couple acres out in my small hometown, and I just bought it then, and I decided I would try to win the world record pumpkin.
But how did you get the pumpkin? Like, did you make the pumpkin, or did you?
I grew it. I got a seed. There's a whole subculture of pumpkin growers, and he's jockeying for in the black market for seeds. And it really starts with the seed. So if you want to win, you have to
find just like I would find like a genes of a 7 foot tall person if I wanted a super tall person.
They literally trace the lineage like pure breed dogs or whatever. So it's like the mother and father, male and female lines, and they trace them. So there's a whole subculture.
So when your pumpkin eventually went under, like, you could sell the seeds and make all this money and stuff?
I unfortunately did not succeed in my goal. I only hit 13th in the Super Bowl of pumpkins. But as a first timer,
you entered the Super Bowl of pumpkins, you came 13th place.
13th place, and I had long hair, and I just went full on crazy, and it was I just had a lot of fun. I put it in a trailer.
But you got a 1,000-pound pumpkin.
It was
right?
I won $200. I
Nice.
think the hotel room, if you stay to the Ritz right next door, and I pulled up to the Ritz. My wife has an X7, so next fancy SUV, and we had a big old pumpkin on a trailer in the back. And do you believe they charged me extra $50 to park with the pumpkin there? I was like, this should be fun for you. It's like, come on, I'm spending how much to stay there?
That's hilarious.
Yeah. It was stupid hobbies.
So the seed is the key thing in growing.
The seed is the key. Okay. But to really
it's just like if I want to have a 7 foot tall kid, it's probably unlikely I'm going to be able to do that given my genes.
Sorry, man. Yeah. Not happening. So it's the seed, and then it's very involved. And one pumpkin plant can reach 2,000 square feet, and you only grow one on a plant. And I'm not exaggerating that number. They grow.
Wait, 2,000 square feet?
Yes. So these things grow geometrically. So you have a main line, they branch off secondary lines.
Okay.
So it's like
that's like a house.
Exponential growth. Yes.
Yeah.
So you do need a lot of areas. They have special contests for growing in small areas because not everyone has you don't actually want them to grow 2,000 square feet. There's people. It's pretty hardcore. Like they found the ideal size of leaf to
because
plant
then it
ratio.
Confines it and it grows up and a little bit
so I think
more
you want to use about 1,500 square feet because you don't want to put too much of the energy into the leaves. You want it to go all into one fruit. So it's very, very involved, and you bury each leaf axial. The person who won, she told me she spends 5 hours a day on her pumpkins in peak growing season. So I have no time for that.
What do you do during that? Like, are you just constantly like weeding it and stuff?
Yeah,
or like
you're weeding it, putting nutrients. You're doing soil tests. You're pruning it. You're getting rid of diseases and bugs, and it's. So I did not do that.
So you just got lucky because you had one. You had one shot.
I didn't get lucky. Well, I did get lucky in that most people grow like 5, and usually one dies, and you only have one pumpkin per plant because you want all the energy to grow into the one pumpkin. So I got lucky in that mine didn't die.
Yeah.
But mine was only 1,000 pounds. The world record's like 2,400 or something. Maybe
Oh
27 now.
wow, that's like the
Every
sumo
year they're
wrestler
going
of
up.
pumpkin. Okay.
Yeah. So I probably got good at 13th, and I kept my $200 check. It's actually on the wall to my right. It's on there. Mementos.
That's
I'm
awesome.
stupidly competitive. The other trophy I have there, it was my early employee Andreas Gross. Maybe listen to this. We did a go-kart race. We bet $10, and I made us plaques. Said first place me, Chris Hall's, last place Andreas Gross. So I put this up behind my desk, just and I took the $10 he gave me, and I put it in that trophy.
That's hilarious.
Maybe there is something though. Like, don't take life too seriously. Like, if you're a hyper competitive person, as I am, like,
Yeah.
just be competitive about stupid stuff, because I think
Yeah.
there is something like, whatever prize, I just going back to deconstructing human behavior, like, it's very interesting how judgmental people get about different accomplishments. But if one thing I think is very funny, like, everyone knows all analogy, like digging holes in the sand, how stupid that is, right? If someone's wasting time, they're digging a hole in the sand. But look at the Olympics. Like, go back to like first principles. Like, how absurd is it? People dedicate their lives to jumping higher than somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I jumped over a stick.
Yeah.
It's so
Especially
stupid.
nowadays when you could get an airplane or something or whatever. Yeah.
I'm not saying that
Yeah.
judgmentally. I'm saying
Yeah.
that actually this is the human condition.
Yeah. We love
And
it.
yes, so but there is some intrinsic success I have because I started a company, went public. I can feel inferior because I'm not Elon Musk, and in the Bay Area, I'll look to your left, you feel poor. You look to your right, you feel rich. But just the absurdity of human competition is just really go first principles. Like, on so many things, like they've like, I don't know why it's the pole vaulting or whatever. I find it the one that's like the most absurd. Like, people getting so excited about jumping higher than somebody else. And I'm not anti-sports at all. I actually
Yeah.
get it a lot, like discipline and teamwork, and like, you need competitiveness to drive, but just most human behaviors are quite absurd when you unpack them.
Well, if you think my father-in-law is a pole vaulter,
Oh shoot,
and
Jesus, that made him mad at me. I'm
yeah,
just kidding.
no, I mean, but it's the will to just do something different and be better at and compete, and it's just and then of course if people want to watch it, then it's even more exciting because
Yeah.
it's like, well, then I'm entertaining people, and someone's like, it's just like the juggler or the magician that entertains you.
And I'd say then when I do see some people, because we're coastal elitists, they get very judgmental of small achievements. Like, you see on Facebook, especially a lot of like, someone I saw posted their cosmetology license they got, and they're so proud of themselves. It's very easy to be judgmental, but it's also like, so many people are playing status games, even if they don't realize it. Somehow
Oh
your
yeah, we all
achievement's a
are.
real achievement, and I'm
Yeah.
not being superficial. This is a real achievement. But no, you're all dead in the end, and I disdain some of the elitism stuff now, and the fancy dinners and awards and self-congratulatory behavior. It's as dumb as my pumpkin.
Now, what is a conspiracy theory that you believe?
You sent me that one ahead of time. I'm not sure. I have more like an indirect conspiracy theory, which is, I think the whole deep state thing is real, but in a different way than I think Trump or whatever. It's kind of going back to like our behavior of people. Like, to me, the deep state is, there are these individual actions of thousands of people who have been indoctrinated by different ideologies, and they kind of miss the bigger picture, kind of like pole vaulting or growing pumpkins. And we have this machine that is growing like a cancer that will kill us. And this is not a Donald Trump pro statement by any means. I don't like, and I'm not political, but this conspiracy, I think that maybe it's deeper than America, that institutions will eventually self-corrupt by sheer size because bureaucracies just grow. And running companies, like, I think most of us see, like,
I mean, it's just
people always hire more
all
people.
bureaucracies grow, and then they take care of themselves, and they don't always see the bigger picture, right? I mean,
yes,
it's just like we all do that.
So I'm a believer in the deep state, but without a controlled central planner. And
so it's like a Darwinian deep state where it's just the survival of the fittest and just kind of grows and evolves in an organic way, but without like some sort of
no
centralized
master plan.
design.
Yeah, maybe in some hyperdimensional being there's something, but yes, it's almost like this. It just, you could probably trace it down to like some neuronal behavior. Like there's a neuron that's black and this one's white, and then this one wants to be the opposite color of the other one. This weird emergent pattern evolves from like these very simple set of rules, almost like a fractal. So I feel like maybe that's why all empires eventually seem to self-implode. And maybe why America has done so well is, even if capitalism can be cruel and rugged individualism is not the theoretical ideal end state. Like I think Star Trek had a good theoretical ideal end state, like money's post-scarcity, all that. Like in this practical, terrible Darwinian world we are now, maybe the reason America is so resilient is that we celebrate individualism and success, because that is a way of breaking down like strict, rigid institutional structures that, again, no master plan, but just self-reinforce.
Our last question we ask all of our guests: what conventional wisdom or advice do you think is generally bad advice?
Well, I have one on startups. It's becoming accepted wisdom, but I'm happy because I was going on a limb here thinking that like I was alone. But so this probably won't be unconventional now, but still there's some last gasps of this. Vision is so much more important than data, and the lean startup, one of the most toxic and terrible moves for Silicon Valley.
Okay.
And I think
explain more, because this is I think this is still a little controversial.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Smart people can make themselves very stupid by following frameworks.
Yeah.
And I think
maybe like, I mean, obviously you have like Eric Ries and Steve Blank, and you have all these like very smart people who've been writing books about this kind of leaner startup thing.
I don't think I don't even know if they disagree with me. I think it got perverted. It's become a cargo cult.
Okay.
Where I think if you're a founder, let's just go back to when all those big things came out, because I'm not old. I missed the .com boom, but now I guess I'm old because of the mobile boom.
Yeah.
The types of founders, I'm curious if you agree with me on this, but go back 15 years. When people were founders, it was the archetype of people who were ambitious, followed their own paths, probably always certain often wrong stereotypes applied to VCs. Those were founders. Overconfident. I think the lean startup was a very good say for someone like that. Say, hey, check your assumptions, measure everything. Like, you're going to be wrong a lot. And by the way, this whole tech thing is very immature. So
it's just A/B testing everything is kind of the lean startup way, right?
Yeah. I think that actually makes a lot of sense. But now fast forward to where we are now, being the tech ecosystem's probably 10 times bigger than 2008 and 100 times bigger than after the .com crash. People starting companies, that people are trying to like put a formula around startups. And there's this, I think, lean startup. I call it a cargo cult because like, oh, look, we're A/B testing, we're pivoting, we're learning. Yeah. But they're just like a leaf in the wind just blowing around. And so I think for someone like me, like I am overly confident. Like, yes, check my assumptions, check the data, that makes sense. So I don't think it's bad in theory, but I think it's being misapplied by people who want a playbook, and that just doesn't exist. And I think with the founders I know are really top ones. I have not heard a single founder saying that their team don't use data enough, but I hear so many founders and CEOs like, why are my teams so narrow-minded and missing the bigger picture?
Yeah.
And because it's like outcome versus output, and running a lot of tests becomes like, I'm running tests, I'm doing my job. Like, no, you're not. Your job is to drive outcomes. And so it's not anti-data, it's just zooming out and like, how do we fit it into this bigger picture?
Yeah, there are so many companies, I think, that they say they're using data, but they're not actually using it that well, and they would be better off almost using anecdotes and kind of or thinking about things, or just kind of understand. It's like, oh, my mom is going through this issue, so therefore, those types of things probably they're maybe not perfect, but maybe better than the way they use data today.
For sure, I would stack vision number 1, judgment number 2, data number 3. And in some ways, judgment is sort of like this Bayesian pattern matching that we've got from our vision and tying it all together. So I think when people talk about intuition or judgment, it's not anti-data per se. It's like, I think it's like the synthesis of a vision and the data, and that.
Yeah.
And most people don't have that.
Yeah. Well, also a lot of times you're wrong on your vision. A lot of people are wrong.
For sure.
on their vision. And so, the whole idea of lean startup is, I think it was to make it make it a little less likely people would be wrong or something like that.
But I think the other thing, though, is like what was the ecosystem at that point in time, and a lot of that was applied to like mobile.
Yeah,
it was a great time to A/B test because there weren't established incumbents all over the place.
Yeah, you're doing little app store things and stuff like that, or whatever.
Yeah, you could launch a piece of crap, and if people were searching in the app stores, like, oh, there's demand here, but we're mature into this. So maybe in AI, it is actually a great thing now. Like, try a bunch of stuff and just see if anything clicks. There's no competition. So
yeah,
I think a lot goes back to like start with first principles always. And it's probably not controversial to you or any founder, but you at least know why you're applying this framework and when you're not. Just don't blindly apply it. So so there's something
the first
completely
principles thing is hard though. Even that one is super hard. Like you can't go to first principles on every single thing. Like I don't even like go to first principles on like something you just have to accept conventional wisdom on. I've never proved to myself that the earth is round. I'm just kind of like accepting the conventional wisdom that it is round. I don't know that we didn't fake the moon landing or something. I'm just accepting the conventional wisdom that we went to the moon in 69.
I completely agree, but then I think maybe have this tickle when like the conventional wisdom, something doesn't feel right.
That's right. Then dive in. You got to go dive in on something. You just can't dive in on everything.
And then you probably also want to intentionally be contrarian on one or two things, because if you're not, you're probably like copying. So I completely agree.
Yeah.
And we have to trust our experts. And at times, one thing that I don't know where I'm going here, but like I think of like the big fights around like climate change and like what I tell people, like people are so certain on both sides. And I'm like, look, I've 99% sure you've never dug up an ice core. You're having to trust people.
Yeah.
And so at some point you need to trust people. And part of our problem now is like we don't have these trusts in institutions and best practices, and maybe it's some sort of pendulum, because like I think people trusted the lean startup way too much, because like it just became like a cult. So when do you trust? When do you push? Not easy.
Yeah. We trust our tribe, but we don't always trust other things outside the tribe.
Yeah, maybe the lean startup became a tribe. It's become
it was a tribe. Yeah.
The thing in and of itself. And when do you test? When do you not test? Because I'm not anti-data whatsoever. It's just how do you apply it appropriately and know its limits.
This has been amazing. Thank you, Chris Hulls, CEO of Life360, for joining us on World of DaaS. I follow you at Chris Hulls on X. I definitely encourage our listeners to engage you there. This has been a ton of fun.
Cool. Thank you so much, Auren. I appreciate it, and good conversation.
And if you're a super data nerd, go to worldofdaas.com. That's DAAS, worldofdaas.com, and sign up for our weekly Data as a Service news roundup newsletter.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider rating this podcast and leaving a review. For more World of DaaS, and DaaS is DAAS, you can subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts. And also check out YouTube for videos. You can find me at Twitter at Auren, that's AUREN, Auren, and we'd love to hear from you.